All right, sports fans, how's everybody out there doing? William Martin coming at you one more time here on YouTube with another edition of the 300 Pounds of Sports Knowledge Podcast. The Texas Rangers have enjoyed one of the greatest turnarounds in Major League Baseball history. Prior to this year, the Rangers had not made the playoffs since 2016, which was also the last year that they produced a winning record. 2 years ago, the Rangers lost 102 games for their worst season since 1973, while they lost another 94 last year. Then came the decision by the Rangers ownership group, rather, led by Ray Davis last August, to move on from John Daniels, who had been leading this team's front office for a very long time, which dated back to the franchise's only two American League pennants prior to this year, of course, in 2010 and 2011. Daniels was out, and then former MLB pitcher Chris Young was promoted. And before you knew it, what appeared to be a long term rebuild in North Texas ended with the Rangers claiming their first World Series championship in franchise history on Wednesday night. You look at some of the big moves, and of course, these two still fell while Daniels was still with the organization. But signing Marcus Simeon and Corey Seager in free agency to solidify the middle of their infield prior to the 2022 season. The big one for me was hiring Bruce Bochy last offseason. Of course, it looked like Bochy was going to be done after he left San Francisco. And you know what? The Rangers ponied up enough bread to get him out of retirement. And Bochy, he's won every place that he went because you figure he's gotten three teams to the World Series, won a World Series championship with two different clubs, and also he has four World Series championships. So obviously, whenever his, managerial career is over, the Cooperstown gonna come is going to come calling. And it's one of those where he's a player's manager. He knows how to relate to his guys. He knows how to relate to a veteran team. And he's one guy that whether it was San Diego, San Francisco, or Texas, nobody really has a bad thing to say about him, even within the organization as a whole. So that just gives you an idea as to the person that Bruce Bochy is. He has a very calming influence. He knows how to get the most out of his players. And again, players go through a wall for him. And I think we saw that this year for the Rangers en route to their championship. Then, going out this past offseason, signing Jacob DeGrom and Nathan Eovaldi. And of course, the Jacob DeGrom deal didn't work out, and it's probably not going to work out because the oft injured Cy Young Award winner is once again hurt. But you got a guy like Nathan Eovaldi, and he has a championship background. He helped the Red Sox win in 2018, and he pitched like that all season long. And in the regular season, and it carried over to the postseason as well. Chelsea Grin, what's going on? You're saying it may not have been a 7 game series, but man, it feels good to see this team win after the tragic history, especially 2011. I'm happy for them. I'll tell you like this, and I'm going to touch on this a little bit more uh, on here. For me, I think the series changed when Adolis Garcia got injured. And I say that because that could have been the perfect storm for the Diamondbacks to take advantage and, get back ahead in this series. But the Rangers just said, you know what, next man up. And everybody just stepped up from that. I think everybody used that as a rallying cry within that clubhouse to go out there and take care of their business. And then you look at the pitching in game 5, and then of course in the ninth inning, Torey Lovello going to his closer who had been roughed up in game number 1, hadn't pitched since game number 1. And we see in these postseason series in baseball, once you get to a pitcher early in a series, it tends to carry over throughout that entire series. And I think that's what happened again in game number 5. And of course, the Rangers were able to ride that big wave of momentum to the championship. But then you think about the pitching. throughout the year for the Texas Rangers. And of course, making two big moves prior to the trade deadline, going out there and getting Jordan Montgomery, and then, of course, the veteran Max Scherzer. And of course, like Garcia, Scherzer was injured during the World Series. And honestly, Scherzer was injured for the bulk of his time with Texas. And honestly, I don't think that Scherzer at this point in his career is going to be the Scherzer from maybe like 5 years ago with the Washington Nationals. I just don't see it. He's an older pitcher. He can't stay healthy. We saw that with the Mets. We're seeing that with the Rangers. And I think it's kind of going to be that way for him and DeGrom there. But nonetheless, Jordan Montgomery made himself some money during this postseason run. He's a left-handed pitcher. Of course, a lot of people are going to point fingers at Brian Cashman for getting rid of him before when he was with the Yankees. But you think about his pitching performances against Tampa Bay in the wild card round, then against Baltimore in the divisional round, and then against Houston in the LCS, and then of course in the World Series. This young man just made himself a lot of money, and somebody's going to pay him a boatload of money to pitch for them come next year. But there were some keys all season long for the Rangers. You think about it, getting off to that fast start to begin the year because nobody expected that from the Rangers. We're talking about a club that over the last 3 years, they finished in fourth place or worse in the American League West. And they got off to that quick start. They were 40-20 on June 6th, and they set the pace in the AL West and then battling with the Houston Astros and Seattle Mariners all season long in that division. Remember, the Astros came on strong, so did the Mariners, and looked like at one point that it was going to be Seattle's division because Texas had cooled off, Houston had cooled off, and then Houston and Texas finished tied for the top spot. The tiebreaker went to the Astros, and Texas was not playing good baseball heading into the postseason. But I think just getting in, okay, and they faced the Rays, and I talked about this when the Rangers eliminated the Rays. The Rays not really having fans to go to the Trop and support them really is a detriment for to them because the Rays play great baseball down there in Tampa. And then Texas was able to take advantage of that because it was quiet there. It was like a scrimmage, and their bats got going. It carried over against the Orioles, and then as good as the Orioles were all season long, they had question marks in their pitching staff. Texas was able to exploit that in that series, and that's how they got Baltimore out of there very quickly. And then the epic against the Houston Astros in the ALCS. I knew that series was going to go seven. It was a coin toss. I went with the Astros based off of experience, but you looked at the resolve of the Texas Rangers. I mean, they were down 3-2 in that series, went back and won the last two on the road in Houston. And for what it's worth, they didn't lose a road game this entire postseason. That's unheard of. Very rarely can you say a team, is able to do that, not just in baseball, but in any sport period where you're playing a 7 game series. And Texas went out there and just dominated. And that just speaks to the character of this team because it's difficult, regardless of the sport, to go out there and win on the road. Then, getting to the World Series against Arizona. And I know that viewership was down. The casual fan wasn't interested in the World Series, but I'll tell you like this: both Texas and Arizona deserved to be in the Fall Classic, and Arizona was hot. And I mean, you figure the way that they started, Diamondback started off strong too before they slumped, and then they got into the postseason and got it going. But I really think coming back like they did in those games against Milwaukee, against the Brewers, then going out there and just beating up on the Dodgers really gave this team life. They were down against the Phillies, but they weren't out. But they finally ran into a buzzsaw in the form of the Rangers. And credit to the Rangers because the way that this Arizona offense was playing and this Texas pitching staff shut them down, with the exception of game two, they shut down that Diamondbacks offense. And the rest is history. So I look at it like this: everything for me, and I'm going to touch on this right now, Chelsea Grin, like you mentioned right there, it's come full circle for the Texas Rangers because you go back to those 2 years where they made the World Series. In 2010, they lost to Bruce Bochy and the San Francisco Giants. The San Francisco Giants had the better team. You look at that pitching staff. that they had at that time with a young Madison Bumgarner, Tim Lincecum, and of course Matt Cain, and then of course key hits from key veterans such as Buster Posey and Brandon Crawford, just to and Brandon Belt, just to name a few. But then coming back in 2011, a more motivated Texas Rangers team, a darn good Texas Rangers team. And to me, on paper in 2011, Texas was better than the St. Louis Cardinals. And it looked like they had it all wrapped up, if you will, in game number six before it came apart. And I guarantee you, I've talked about this before and I'll say it again. David Freese David Freese will never have to buy another drink within the city of St. Louis as long as he lives, for that epic performance that he had. And of course, people were pointing the fingers at Nelson Cruz for what he did, or how he couldn't make that catch, in game number six, which would basically open up the floodgates for the Cardinals to come back. And then, of course, game seven, more heartbreak for the Texas Rangers. And it took them this long to get back there. And sometimes, as a fan base will see something happen and to their team, to their favorite team, and it sits with them for the longest time. And finally, when they're able to get over that hump, you know, it just becomes sweeter. I think back to the Boston Red Sox, and of course, the 1978 when they had the 15-game lead in August against the New York Yankees, only to falter. And then, of course, Bucky Dent, with what he did in the 163rd game. I'm not gonna say what the rest of what Boston fans feel about Bucky Dent at that time. And then, of course, '86 with Bill Buckner, and of course, I've been one who said, I think Buckner was the scapegoat, if you will, for the Red Sox meltdown in game number six, because it wasn't all Buckner's fault. There was a lot of blame for a lot of people to go around, but nonetheless, when Boston finally won in 2004, all was forgiven. It's the same thing with the Chicago Cubs. You think back to Steve Bartman. Unfortunately, the fan to try to reach over and catch the ball in Wrigley Field, in Game Six, and then of course, finally, the Cubs were able to win it all in 2016. And of course, people, they still talk about it, but it's not talked about in the same vein. And I think now, for the Texas Rangers fans, I mean, there is definitely some vindication there, especially now that they have seen their beloved Rangers win their first World Series championship in franchise history. So Corey Seager, he's now a two-time World Series MVP, joins Reggie Jackson as the only guys to win World Series MVP honors with two different clubs. Of course, Seager was the World Series MVP for the Los Angeles Dodgers in 2020. And, like I said, Jordan Montgomery just made himself a ton of money. You love what you saw all season long from Nathan Eovaldi, and then Bruce Bochy joining an elite list of managers who have, won four World Series championships. And I think it was a fitting end to this MLB season because I think from the word go, this MLB season was unpredictable. And this is what the commissioner wanted, Rob Manfred. And I think also this is what the powers that be, and I'm talking about the team owners, the guys that the commissioner works for. I think this is what they wanted. They want parity in their sport. They want unpredictability in their sport. And this is why, we have not seen a repeat World Series champion since the 2000 Yankees. And I mean, honestly, for what it's worth, very rarely do we see a team make consecutive World Series appearances. So this is what, the powers that be wanted, because when you look at what the Diamondbacks and Rangers respectively were doing last year, at the end of last season, throughout free agency, spring training, and even at the start of this season, I guarantee you there weren't plenty of people out there that thought either the Rangers or Diamondbacks, if not both, were going to be in the position that they were as far as playing for the World Series championship. So, did the new rules work as far as the pitch clock and the wider bases? I think they did. I expected, you know, teams offensively to take advantage of the pitch clock, and we saw it so much. There were more stolen bases this year, and these are the changes that the powers that be around Major League Baseball felt needed to be done in order to make their game more exciting. Now, the expanded postseason, like it or not, is here to stay, in spite of the fact that we once again saw a lot of the top teams being sent home early. I know that there's a possibility of maybe things being tweaked to the postseason format, but like I said, rest assured, they're not going to decrease the amount of teams. One thing I think could possibly happen is maybe the divisional round would get extended to 7 games because we're seeing the top seeds go out. You know, 3 teams went out this year, 2 teams went out last year. And it's one of those where at this point it looks almost like it's a hindrance, if you will, to win your division as opposed to come through the wild card round where you keep playing, you keep in your rhythm, and possibly, making it a best of 7 as opposed to a best of 5 is going to give those top teams more of an opportunity to get solidified and get their footing going and trying to win a series. Possibility. I mean, it wouldn't be surprising to me because again, we're seeing a lot of good teams who have won more than 100 games be one and done. And of course, I'll put it like this: in regards to the Atlanta Braves, I know that the Braves looked like they were going to be runaway World Series champion for the bulk of the season, but I felt like if there was one team in the National League that could have beat them, it was going to be the Phillies because the Phillies just match up well against the Braves. The Tampa Bay Rays, as good as they are, they're not built for the postseason. Baltimore, they ran into a very good Texas team. Baltimore still had a phenomenal season, but sometimes in those series, it's all about who you match up with. And then with the Dodgers had a lot of question marks in their pitching staff. They faced a hot Arizona Diamondback team, and it caught up with the Dodgers. So let's see if there are going to be changes made to the postseason format. I think free agency is going to be extremely exciting. All eyes are going to be on what Shohei does, but then also there's a lot of key pitchers out there. And, pitching is always a key. Like I said, Jordan Montgomery just made himself a ton of money. Blake Snell, uh, of the San Diego Padres, and I'm about to say formerly of the San Diego Padres because I really don't see a scenario where he goes back there as the Padres are going to be looking to dump some salary this offseason. But nonetheless, it's one of those where I think he is going to be very coveted on this free agent market, and what's going to happen with Juan Soto as well. So there's a lot of questions heading into free agency, and of course, a lot or some of it will be taken care of at the winter meetings. Then on top of that, you know, you look at the defending champs now, the Texas Rangers. What's going to be their chances of repeating? I'll say like this: the Rangers will have a chance because we've seen from this ownership group and we've seen from this front office, they're willing to go out there and make moves. They're willing to go out there and spend money. But again, we haven't seen a repeat World Series champion now in nearly 25 years. So I think it's going to be tough for the Rangers to do, but it's not going to be unattainable at the same time. Got to see what happens with trade. We got to see what happens with free agency. And also the big key, which teams are able to stay healthy. But at the end of the day, I think this was a phenomenal baseball season. Obviously, if you're a Texas Rangers fan, it was very phenomenal for you. The Rangers went out there, they took care of their business. And I'm not even going to say that the Rangers got hot at the right time. The Rangers were a good baseball team all season long. And then here, and well, not here in October, but first in October and now in November, Texas went out there. They found a way to make the key hits. They got the key pitching, and they had one of the best managers that this game has ever seen in Bruce Bochy leading the way. It was a perfect storm for the Rangers. Everything came full circle, and now North Texas is celebrating as they finally have a World Series championship to call their own. So, folks, that is going to wrap it up. And as always, I want to take this time out to thank you for tuning into the 300 Pounds of Sports Knowledge podcast here on YouTube. I want to take this time out to thank all of you fine folks out there for tuning in. And if you have not already, please feel free to subscribe to this channel. Now, if you're on the X, formerly known as Twitter, please feel free to follow me at 300 Pounds of Sports. And like I always say, if you follow me, it'll be my pleasure to follow you right back. There's also the sports discussion group on Facebook at the Sports Depot 365. Now you can check it out. Drop a line and be a part of one of the better sports debating sites going on social media. Chelsea Grin, as always, appreciate you chiming in. I'll tell you, like I'm about to tell everybody else, excuse my voice right now. I'm dealing with a bad throat, but you know what? You still got to go out there and do what you got to do. But thanks once again for the support. And once again, fine folks, my name is William Martin, and I'm signing off. And I'm saying thanks once again for tuning into the 300 Pounds of Sports Knowledge podcast here on YouTube. Be well, everybody.